The Black Histories Project is an extension of the work that we've done with the Village Initiative. So the project was somewhat of a vision. I wanted to tell more about the African history, the local African American history. You know, we started gathering the oral histories from folks in the community.
What's important about the project, I think, is that it adds in and fills in a big gap that was left out of history when I was a child in this area in the local schools. Up until my adult years, I never had a good feel or an idea of how I fit in to the history, how my family fit into the history. And so it adds the story and the stories of those local icons and leaders here in the community. And it gives us a deep understanding of how they contributed to the building of Williamsburg and the nation as a whole.
I would say my mom says it best when she says, I am Williamsburg, and I am a legacy of her. So any efforts to really uncover and explore the historicity of Williamsburg itself is a really exploration of my family, my community, who I am.
Coming from a southern community like Williamsburg, people always, people say, hey, what's your name? And say, well, I'm Brandon Lee. Oh, you're such and such's son, or you're so and so's son. And when you grow up in a community like that, that reminder that you wear somebody else's name on your back makes you have to kind of live out life in a way that makes those people proud.
When I look at my history, there are members of my family who've been here from 1639, 1638. I have ancestors, great-grandparents who were part of the first free black community in Williamsburg. I have grandparents who were enslaved in what we currently interpret within Colonial Williamsburg grounds. So to have that historical piece, those are parts of the story that I believe are vital.
Oddly enough, I'm just finding how my family is connected and how much of my family is connected to the history itself. And I feel like I'm about to open up a treasure trove.
I grew up in a family that definitely made sure you knew the history. I know my last name's Lee. I know my mother's side, they're Tabs. My grandmother would say, well, sometimes you don't want to go all the way down that family tree. And when we were talking about it because of the idea that we were enslaved.
I am a student of history, and I give Frederick Douglass credit for saying, if you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it.
When you think about slavery and what it did to the American family, how it broke it apart and stripped it apart, it's hard for a lot of African Americans to know the beginning or their origin in this country or before they came here.
So there were folks who were sent to plantation to plantation to plantation to plantation to plantation, and you don't often get a chance to record your family's histories. So that's difficult. That's difficult to deal with, and I can understand why there was a generation of folks who didn't really talk about it. There's a lot of trauma there.
There was a time when I was not proud to be black. There was a time where I was not proud because I thought that that black folks didn't fight back. I thought that they just allowed themselves to be subdued. The importance of this project, this is why this is relevant.
The triangle, that's what we call the triangle, and that was a strip of black-owned businesses. There was a little store that was owned by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Webb. And you could go down and get, a handful of candy for a penny. Those days are long gone. Then there was Blayton Hospital. Dr. Jones, Joseph Jones, who had his practice in that building, delivered my daughter and delivered me. A community of businesses that contributed to the community that was surrounded by it. It was a mark of pride.
I was born at Community Hospital. My doctor, Dr. Brown, was across the street. He helped deliver me and my brothers. My family is from Williamsburg, but I will say they are from Mulberry Island. They are from Naval Weapons Station. I want to know more about my family. I want to know more. I want to know where they were before they were at Mulberry. I want to know where they came from before they ended up at the Naval Weapons Station. I want to know what they were thinking and feeling when eminent domain came and took away what they knew to be home. I just want to know more about my ancestors. I feel like that is how I'm going to learn more about myself. And I have 2 children, and I want them to know about their great-grandfather and their great-grandmother and their great-great-grandfather and their great-great-grandmother. I want people to find that important.
I have vivid memories of myself touring Colonial Williamsburg as a little brown girl, learning about colonial life, learning about the distinct differences between the genteel class, the merchant class, and the slave class. I have vivid memories of some of my fellow classmates sharing their lineage, their history of being descendants of Peyton Randolph and Patrick Henry. And I'm that little brown girl on the side thinking, well, chances are my forefathers probably picked cotton or were servants for them.
And so for me, I'm finding out that my 4th great grandfather was freed by William Ludwell Lee's will, and he was part of the hot water community. He was part of that first free black community. He had been enslaved, and it's given me an idea of what he did after that enslavement, who he was in this community, and how generations have connected to me present day. So all of that's important. So knowing that they operated sawmills, that they were sawyers and oystermen and watermen, that's important to know that they were farmers and that they farmed land that contributed to the crops that were given to the College of William and Mary. All those things are important. So my family has always been here. You know, how many of my family members were actually maybe behind the college, butchering the meat or working the crops or doing the laundry? Was my great-great-grandmother the laundress for William and Mary? You know, who in my family were doing all these things that seemed to be menial jobs, but were actually essential in the supportive system for the college, the Capitol, the church, and all those people who own homes inside of Colonial Williamsburg and own farms and plantations outside in the rural area.
History has been cherry-picked over so much. There are so many things that you just don't know what is true and what is not. And so it's time for us to tell our stories because we know what is true and we can find the answers. So that's why this is important.
The history will speak for itself. These are the stories that have been kept to us, and now the world is going to hear about the intellectual part of Black people who were raised in Williamsburg.
As an educator, I believe in the power of community. I believe in the power of student voice. I believe in the power of knowing the community, knowing who came before. Like I want my students not just to know about prominent figures in media, but I want them to know about the giants that walked the same streets as them, came from the same neighborhoods as them. I feel honored to be able to offer my time and my resources to preserve a history that will last through generations.
With this project, I think it helps folks get inside of the idea that, hey, you are part of this process that we call America, and you're important to that process. Even though it starts here in a small place, but I hope that this start can help other people in their local communities feel comfortable with the idea of talking about who you are and where you come from.
If we tell these stories wholly and completely as we should, if we go back to the very onset of this country and this town, this capital city, and talk about that 52.4% of the population who were enslaved, if we start to people this town in the way that it actually was in the 18th and 19th century, if we come forward to the 20th and 21st century and talk about the restoration of Colonial Williamsburg, and we establish that those people who were part of the restoration, those Black excavators, the brick masons, and the people who laid the foundations and helped to restore these buildings who were part of that restoration, they were those children and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren of those folks who had come before.
Because African Americans' history doesn't just start with us being the enslaved people. There's history prior to that and history after. And we have these contributions that we've contributed to as inventors and mathematicians and scientists and doing great things. And I believe that understanding our history is more of a unifier than anything else. It will bring us all together. And if we teach the children early to embrace each other's cultures and histories and understand where we've come from, we stand a greater chance of not revisiting that, not revisiting the hate and the discord that we've seen in the past. And so we really want to be on a path to unity and peace and embracing the stories and telling the stories of our community.